Comadres. Welcome to another episode of Comadreando podcast. I'm your host, Marcy, and today we have an amazing guest, Camille, and I will let her introduce herself. Who are you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Proctor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Color of Autism Foundation.
Okay.
And I'm a mom of a 16-year-old autistic son.
Okay, great. So I connected with Camille because I was looking for foundations that represented people of color on the spectrum, and hers just happened to come up, and I started looking into her story, and I felt like it would be something beneficial for the other moms of the show to listen to. So today, our topic is navigating the spectrum as a person of color. And the reason why the topic came up is that as parents of neurodiverse children, a lot of the time when we look at the media and other efforts that are happening, all we see is little white autistic boys, right? And that is not the accurate representation of our population. So, and a lot of... Okay, sorry. He just woke up. Yeah, like my son's on the spectrum too, and he's 14, and he's very he's a Scorpio, so he's very strong-willed. Okay, all right.
My son's just animated, so I was just like, "Can you keep your animation over there and not over here?"
But this is real life. My audience knows that if there's random sounds in the show, it's usually my son scripting in the background or making noise. But as I was saying, a lot of the research out there on autism doesn't represent our population and it doesn't represent our children accurately. So I wanted to have Camille on to be able to show a different side of autism. You know, I have had other people of color with their children on the show, but I feel like her foundation is doing such an amazing job and I want to highlight them. So before we get started in the actual topic, just you said your child is on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get a little bit of your backstory. When did you notice your child was different?
So I noticed he was different when he was when he was 1 year old, because he wasn't walking and he was kind of scooting around. So that was the first sign. And then I noticed as time progressed, he became obsessed with the ceiling fan and he would do some flapping. And then I noticed that he started to have sensitivity to textures and stuff like that. So immediately I knew there was something that was wrong. And I started to I took him to the doctor and I got to know, he's probably just delayed. And at the time, what they thought were autistic characteristics, he really didn't have them. Yeah, he did have the stimming, but they were basing it on the fact that he liked being touched. So he liked being touched and he made eye contact. So that threw a lot of people off. So I kind of got sent on my way quite a bit. But I was pretty steadfast on the fact that it was something. Mm-hmm. And so after so when he turned 2, a little over 2, he was finally diagnosed as having autism spectrum disorder. But that was only because, I had to go from door to door to door to door with this little kid going, "Hey, what is this?" And a interesting part of it is that the person that diagnosed him wasn't a developmental pediatrician. It was a genetic doctor who realized, or well, rather not realized, but through her testing, she found that he had 47 chromosomes instead of 46. In her opinion, people who presented 47, which is a gray area, it's not Fragile X, it's not anything, I don't want to say to be negative, to be held as negative. What it basically is that she called it a gray area. But she said a lot of those people were autistic. And so she got me in to see her friend, a developmental pediatrician, the very next day. And so I was able to get a diagnosis. And I think I'll forever be grateful to her for that, because a couple of things. Knowing about his genetic background, that means it was predisposed and already there.
Yeah.
Right? So as I went on my journey, that took away a lot of the guilt. The guilt that you feel when your child initially is diagnosed with autism. Mm-hmm. You're like, well, it's to this, it's to that, it's to that. But I had to stop myself and go back to exactly what that lady said. 47 chromosomes is 1 over what we quote unquote as the normal range. Mm-hmm. So that's the beginning of my journey.
Wow. And once he was diagnosed at 2 with the diagnosis of autism, did you guys put him in early intervention? What state are you in, by the way?
So now I'm in Michigan. At the time I was living in Georgia. And you got to go back like 14 years ago, right? As when you were having your son. They didn't have like early intervention programs, quote unquote. They had these early programs like to help you recognize the delays, right? But in regards to therapeutic interventions, they really didn't have anything that they could offer. I mean, they had speech. In our particular case, insurance didn't cover anything. So I basically wiped out my retirement, wiped out my savings, wiped out my 401k. We were probably paying somewhere around, and I'm not making this up, probably close to 10 grand a month. If I were to really, really think about everything that it took.
Oh my God.
And so I can't retire. But that's one of the problems. I mean, things have changed, but I won't necessarily say they changed for the better. Yes, a lot of kids are getting into early intervention services early, right? Not to be redundant, but the problem is in communities of color, right?
Yes.
Because, so I have a double-edged sword. So my family is Jamaican by way of Cuba. So I'm Cuban, Jamaican, and African American Black. So
okay,
there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with no Latino. There's nothing wrong with us in our minds. Nothing wrong with any Black people. So that's the other problem. That they never wrong with us.
Yeah. When I've heard this so many times. People of color, Latinos, as well as people that are African American, is that our communities are just like, just leave him alone. He gonna be fine. Let it go. They're gonna grow out of it. Yeah, your daddy didn't speak till he was 5 years old. That is not normal. That is not normal.
No, it's not. And then and so that was another problem all in itself, right? So I didn't have an empathetic community. Well, I can't lie. For the most, I did have an empathetic family. My family pretty much didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so they thought the best that they could do was spoil him, which they did a lot of, and they still do. But the thing is that there weren't the therapies that they needed. There weren't any resources, really. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I'd go to support group meetings and I'd be the only Black person there, or a person of color, period. And I'd say, well, what's going to happen when he's like 12 and he looks like a grown man to the rest of the world, but he's still my baby?
Yep.
If he doesn't know how or understand what it means to yield and the police approach him, what's going to happen? Oh, nothing's going to happen to him. La, 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 la. And I'm like, stop. And so I got put out of a lot of groups. I did. I got put out because they didn't because they thought I was a Debbie Downer, and I kept asking these questions. They asked me not to come back because I was holding them down. I also found out one of the problems with support groups, because like someone asked me, would you join a group? And I'm like, I'm not a group person. I don't like groups. And I'll tell you why. Because I would be in these groups and I would take my son with me, and he would have his little portable video recorder, and he would watch Elmo, and he would count with Elmo on his fingers, but he was nonverbal, right? And so people would look at me, oh, he's going to be mainstreamed. You shouldn't be here. And I'm like, what is this? It was like I was in a room full of Americans, but it was almost like I was transferred back to Jamaica, where we say people are red-eyed and jealous, and they go, it's like, my sufferation is worse than yours. Like, I'm worse than you. Like, who's worse? Like, it was like a competition.
It's the struggle Olympics. I hate that we do that. Not only like do we do that as people of color, right? Like, my suffering is greater than your suffering, but then like in the disability community too. Like, I've seen this so many times. Like, they're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with your kid. He doesn't have autism. Look, he doesn't look like he has autism. Like, what does autism look like? Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, it's crazy that people are not as accepting. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's part of the reasoning for the show is that, like, I want to create community, but not only do I want to create community, I want us to have somewhere to go, a safe space where we're all going to be accepted, regardless of our kids' abilities or not.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I had so many instances. Like I remember being in a grocery store and my son, and at the time I really had no clue. I mean, he was sensitive for everything, but I didn't know why. I didn't even know it was a sensitivity. You know, in my mind back in the early days, it was just this kid just won't comply. He's always crying. What's wrong? I don't know. It's driving me crazy. You know, it was, you know, and the thing is that I had this little old lady said she said he needs his butt whooped. That's not the word she used. And I looked at her and I said, listen, I wouldn't hit an elderly person, but when you say you would smack my child, you've upgraded yourself from elderly person to old bat, and I'll slap an old bat. And at that point, I realized that I offered to beat up an old lady and that I myself probably needed some sort of help. Yeah. And some supports. And so I still
But she's real fresh though. Like she was so fresh. Like why is she coming out of her face telling you that she would hit your child? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, thought it was like he needs to. I smack him, and I was like, and I told her who was gonna get smacked, but I cleaned it up for your podcast. What I really said, but the point is, I knew that the community needed to gain awareness, right? I knew the community needed to gain some support. I knew that too often I was sitting in doctor's offices where there was a child that was autistic and the mom is doing the old, you know, when your mom grabbing you by the shoulder and the wrist and the shoulder and they're pulling your arm out the socket, what old school mothers do.
Yeah.
Like, you better. And it's like, it's not going to work. And so I created the Color of Autism to do a couple things, to really introduce families to what early intervention is, what they should be doing, and what they should be looking for, right? And so you run across these parents who say stuff like, it don't run in my family. I don't know where it came from. And it's like, so did you have an uncle that lived in the back room, like an Uncle Johnny? Yeah, his name was Johnny. Did he live in the back room? Yeah. I said, all right. Did he come out a lot? No. I said, and where did he go when your grandmother died? Oh, he went with my auntie. I said, that was your autistic person. And they're like, oh. I was like, just like the dude, the uncle in Soul Food, the movie, you know, the one that was in the back room with the television. And they're like, ooh, he sure did live like that. You have to bring people to that realization, right? And then I think one of the things with communities of color is that we tend to want to pretty everything up. Like if it's not pretty, if it's not something pretty, we don't want to have it, right? And what I mean by pretty it up, every time I meet a parent that's a person of color, my son is high functioning. He has Asperger's. And I'll say to them, okay, number one, there's no such thing as high functioning autistic
anymore.
They're like, I go, because there's a lot of comorbidities that are associated with autism spectrum disorders, some of which may be anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. And I said, and so by you saying he's high functioning, that means you're probably not addressing his social emotional. He doesn't have any supports because you don't take him to therapy because he's high functioning. And they're like, yeah, well, you might want to work on that. And then for the person that says, oh, my son has Asperger's, I'm like, no, he doesn't. And they're like, yes, he does. And I go, oh, so your son has something that was named after a man that tortured people, disabled people, and he was a neo-Nazi, because Asperger's was a person who was a neo-Nazi that tortured people. And that's what your son has. And they go, oh, no, he doesn't have that. And I go,
no, wait.
I just want to be clear
right now, because let me tell you, I'm a special education teacher. They didn't teach us none of that when we were in school.
No, because you ain't supposed to know about that. That man tortured people. He tortured people because of their disabilities to see, let me see what this is going to work. Is this going to work? Let me put his finger in a light socket. Let's see what happens.
Though people that are just listening, y'all can't see my face. My mouth is open right now.
I mean, this man had no value on the disabled community's lives. The value was just collecting data on their torture. So that's not something that, you know, when people say that, you got to know, you don't know what you don't know, right? But I also feel like people feel like being autistic as a word is just a negative, and it's not. a negative. There are so many people that are neurodivergent and autistic, right? And it's only a positive when someone like Elon Musk says, "Oh, I'm autistic." But the reality of it is that there's a lot of Black and brown people that are autistic that are just like that, that are thriving. Now, I call them the mask population because they don't represent some of the autistic characteristics that we think are the autistic norms, but they are autistic nonetheless. And so we tend to lose sight of that. And that's why I say, that particular population, they're left behind. Now, oftentimes people will say to me like, well, what about the people with greater support needs? Because that's what I like to call it. Some people say profound, but I feel like autistic people need to keep their dignity intact.
Yes.
So I tend not to use words that's going to make you or anybody else feel sorry for them. Mm-hmm. They don't need sorry. They don't need your pity. What they need is your empathy and your support. Yes. So I say greater needs. So instantly, you need to help that person along a little bit more. Mm-hmm. You might need to tie his shoe. In the case of my son, he's going to come up to you like Captain Morgan and go, "Ho, put that foot up." Like you're supposed to know, like, tie this. I mean, that's just how my son gets down. He's like, "Ain't no shame in this game. I don't know how to tie my shoe. Can you do it?" And I've seen him walk up to, it's funny, I've seen him walk up to big burly men, be like, and they'll do it. Because it's something about, because he's totally authentic. Sometimes people do a double take. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We went to Cuba to visit like some relatives that I had it was like somebody was like, "Yeah, that's your cousin. Don't you remember?" I was a fetus. No, but whatever. But I go there and I'm talking to the people and I'm telling them like autismo and they're like, cute, I'm like,
yeah.
Because they had no clue. No. So then our driver was telling us, he was like, these kids, we just leave them in the house. And he goes, but he's fun. They should bring their kids outside. They shouldn't leave them in the house. This boy is fun. This boy, this is like, they were like, and they felt like they had been missing out on a whole population of people because of how much they enjoyed my son. And that's what people need to understand. You're missing out on a whole population of people. And so, I try to be optimistic. I am optimistic about this now, but I wasn't optimistic about this, like I said, in the early years, because I was so, I want to say I was obsessed with fixing. I was so obsessed with fixing that I was breaking myself.
Yes.
Right. Like parents will say, well, this autism broke up my marriage, or this autism made me. No, autism didn't do anything to me that I didn't do to myself.
Yep.
And while I feel like parents really, really do need support, I also feel like parents need to take themselves out of the equation.
Yep.
And I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound mean, but your kid is you got a 14-year-old, so you know how it goes. Your kid is like little for like 5 minutes.
Yep. He's a grown-up.
And so you really don't have time to be wallowing in self-pity.
No.
You need to find your resources quickly and keep it moving. Like people will say to me, "Oh, you're an autism mom." No, I'm not an autism mom. I'm not autistic. What I am is a mother of an autistic 16-year-old who, I love to death. And who I am is an autism advocate that wants to make sure that your child and every other child out there gets, their support needs met. I mean, it's funny because people always laugh at me because I don't make a lot of videos on, my friend's mom called it TikTok, TikTok, Facebook gram. She put them all together. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't do that because it's not about me. And sometimes if I see someone too often, then it's not about whatever you're talking about. It's about you.
Yeah.
And so I don't really get down with that because, it's hard to advise people on certain things because protocols are changing all the time, right? So I try not to get into the area of recommending this or recommending that. But what I will say to a person in a community of color is like, if your child has a Medicaid waiver, the only therapy that they're gonna really allow you to have in certain states, with the exception of like New York, California, Pennsylvania, there's a handful of, the only thing they're gonna allow you to have is ABA. And I know that autistics hate ABA, and there's a lot of good reasoning behind that because it is a hot mess, but you can make
bringing an ABA therapist on, a person of color too, and I want to discuss that because it's like there's so much. There's like this is like kind of like how when people talk about gun laws and stuff, like there's like a big like pro and there's a big con. So I want to kind of like uncover that, and then for people to come to their own conclusion regarding that, because like I feel like he had ABA when he was little, but like it all depends on how the person is implementing it and whether they're teaching them to generalize it across different environments.
You're absolutely
He didn't continue to get it like past 5 years old. It was just at the beginning. But for us, it was beneficial. Some other people have different opinions. So I want to kind of like bring that to the forefront. But continue. Sorry, Camille.
No. That's actually the point, because here's the thing. You can't just say, okay, so this is my point. If you're in a community of color and that's the only thing they're offering you, I'm not going to tell you, oh, no, don't take it. It's torture, because it's like treating your child like a dog. No, really, it kind of is treating your So hear me out. It's kind of like I'm a contradiction. You can't go without anything when you don't have nothing.
It's true.
But what you can do is you can say to the ABA therapist or to the BCBA, listen, I want you to concentrate on these things. I want him to know how to eat with the utensils. I need for him to be toilet trained, if we can work on that together, or whatever the case may be. If the family is Muslim, then you need to teach him about his left hand. You need to do all of these things. These are things that are important in our household. And as a parent, you need to be collecting data on your own child, not just for that BCBA, but also for the school systems when you get them there, right?
Yep.
I think those things are important. Listen, say, hey, I don't want you getting a reward system. Like, no, we're not going to be giving out Cheetos and Skittles in exchange for good behavior, because then he's going to be fat and autistic. And then you're going to still talk about him. And for your, I say this in a joking way. Literally, in the world, it's going to be two double negatives. Which neither is a negative, but you know what I'm saying. He's going to be overweight and autistic, and then they're going to be like, "Ooh, look at him." Yeah, look at him, because every time he did something good, you gave him a treat. The incentive should be how the person feels when they've accomplished something.
Yeah.
Like, that's the incentive of doing certain things. And then also, I think some of the manding that's part of the ABA process should be based on each individual child, because they don't really have a curriculum, I feel, that's really culturally competent.
Does not.
We have so the Color of Autism, we do these trainings. We do them every quarter, and they're for like 5 weeks. And we bring in people of color. Like, we bring in ABA therapists. And one in particular is a young man named Derek Roberts. He does trauma-informed ABA. And he really breaks down to our parents what that is. And he goes through everything. But we use, everyone is a person of color. And the reason we do that is because, just think about it. And I invite anyone who's listening to come and join, because you can be any place in your journey. You could have a grown child and you'll still get something out of it, because you're sitting there amongst your peers, people that understand what you've gone through, right? And what your journey is like.
Yep.
And so they get there and they get to see people that look like them. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking. Everybody has a question, as opposed to sitting in a room with people that don't look like you, and you fold your arms. Oh no, I'm good. I ain't got nothing to say. I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah.
So we try to bring comfort into, this whole autistic world, because I always tell people, like, I had this lady say, well, we don't use autism. We use person with autism. And I say, oh, that's your problem. I said, but I have an autistic son. And the reason I take this language on is because My son is going to be part of a community, right? So how can I tell him he's better than the community that he's part of? If they say they're autistic, and I'm like, no, you're a person with autism, that makes you a little bit better. You have to, I mean, I'm not going to be on this earth forever. He needs a place to be. He needs a community that's going to keep him safe. And I will say without a doubt, the autistic community is like every other community. They bicker, they argue, they fight, but at the end of the day, they're going to take care of their own.
I love that. I was gonna say, so I feel like, I don't know, with the label of like autistic versus person with autism, I feel like that goes a lot, like, you know how people have like a self-identify, like I feel like I'm gonna leave it to however that person feels comfortable identifying as, you know, like it's kind of like, you know, I identify as Afro-Latina, right? And then another person in my family might not identify as Afro-Latina, even though we have the same heritage. But that's their prerogative, you know. That's like on them. But I see where you're going with the label of the person self-identifying as autistic. I see the power behind that, and also like the fact that other people, like if other people are rallying behind that terminology or that label of identification, I can see how that would be obviously a positive.
So I put it to you like this. A person with autism basically came from parents. Parents and practitioners. Like, and they felt like that was empowering, person first, because it was like, well, autism doesn't define me. And like in itself, it sounds good, right? But to an autistic person, their autism does define them. Because if you think about it, autistic people have certain abilities. And I'm not going to be one of those people, oh, he has superpowers. But no, they have, some of them have certain abilities to what I like to call smell the BS and know when it's coming. Right? And I just think that there's certain things that come along with being autistic, no matter where you are on that spectrum. It's part of who you are. And that's the only reason I had to come to terms with, because I used to say the same thing. Why can't you just pick and choose what you want to be? And you can still pick and choose who you want to be, but just don't look at it as being something negative, because it's not necessarily something negative. And then, so it's easy for me to say that because I'm not changing my son's diapers, meaning he, you know, but for that person who has a 28-year-old who's changing a diaper, they probably don't understand where I'm coming from because they never got the full support that they needed, you know? And so people, and it's funny because self-advocates, people always try to paint them with this brush of being mean, whatever you want to have it, and argumentative. Some people are, but aren't some non-autistic mean? I mean, there's assholes everywhere. Excuse my language.
It's true.
I mean, so being autistic doesn't make you exempt from that. But what I found out is that they tend to care more about, they have more empathy for that parent that's taking care of the child, like I said, with more support needs than a lot of us would even imagine. So they understand. But I think part of the problem is that these two worlds have been colliding for so long.
Yeah.
And everybody wants somebody to listen to them. And so I'm just lucky enough, and I feel fortunate for the self-advocates that I know, because I know some amazing ones of color. And, you know, I know one who's a professor at Rice University. I know someone that's a consultant for the New York public school system. She helps them make all of their classrooms for ASD sensory friendly, you know, and to meet the needs of those students. I know someone that's the head of HR at a large corporation. I know there's a lot of autistic people that are people of color. You know, it's not just the white people that you see all the time. And I think that it's important for us to embrace it more. So we can be out there. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, these people are out there and you think that's the only representation. And we everywhere. Like like we are black people, black and brown people are everywhere. Right?
Yes, I agree.
So, we need to come up off this stigma and just embrace who our children are, embrace who we got in our houses. Like, that's I got what I got. Like people will be like, oh, well, what does he do? Like they'll give you that quiz, and because you always
what's his little superpower? What's his little quirk? You're like,
oh Lord, they give me that autism quiz, and I just side eye them like, huh? Or what? Does he talk? Yeah, he talks, but like my son, yeah, he talks, and sometimes I don't know what he's saying, and I swear to you, he's like a mumble rapper. And if I could get some beats behind him, I would be rich. Like I wouldn't even have to worry about what happens when I'm dead, because I'm gonna get some beats behind him, and I'm just gonna let him mama. It's like what?
You know what's funny though? When you really listen to them, they're like saying a lot. Like Aiden the other day, I forgot what it was that he came out with that I was like, what? And it was kind of like he made a comment about something that was happening, and it was like so on point that I was like, who are you and where's Aiden? But it was like sarcastic, like the comment that he made, and I was just like, but it's funny because like our kids, like a lot of the time the stuff that they say is, at least for Aiden, is unintelligible, right? Like we can't really like decipher what he's saying, and a lot of the time it sounds like echolalic speech, or like I just found out this is called Gestalt language. So a lot of the Gestalt language he uses like repeating stuff from cartoons, but it applies to the situation that's happening in front of him, which is really funny. So he'll pop out with something from like Yo Gabba Gabba, but it has to do with the situation that's happening in front of him. Girl. I'm the
girl. This is what we're over here talking about, Manny. And so one of the things is that my son, he speaks other languages. He speaks like a few languages, but he doesn't care that much for English. So his preferred language really is Spanish, and Spanish, he's fluent, and there is no, what did you say? What? Everybody understands him, except for me sometimes. But the thing that's funny is that he was over here talking about Manny, and I was like, what the hell is Manny? Like, yeah, Manny. Of course it was Handy Manny. And it was Mr. I don't know, it was somebody else. And then one time he got us with this Eoji. He said it for like the longest time, Eoji. And the teacher was like, who is this Eoji? And I'm like, Eoji, what is that? And then this went on for like 2 months, I swear to you. And then one day my daughter came to me. She said, that's G.I. Joe spelled backwards. Then he would go to class and he would say stuff like, wagon. And they were like, he keeps saying wagon. And I said, wagon. He wants a wagon. And I realized he was saying what's going on in patois.
Oh, he's so I have to Jamaican patois.
Wagon. And then I realized he was saying wagon. But it's just like the stuff that he does, it's just beyond my realm of comprehension. Like, I did this interview a few days ago, actually on Tuesday, and this gentleman he insisted on, they wanted to have him in the interview. Okay. And unfortunately they put us in front of a window where there was a bunch of cars. So he's not even looking at the man. He's looking out the window. The man says, so Ari, what do you want to be when you grow up? This boy said, a grown man. I'm like, well, that's what he said. That's what he wants to be. I mean,
oh my God.
I don't care. Let him live his life. I don't care. I don't care. Like, people, it's hard now for me to laugh at him and not care at this point. Like I said, back when he was 2 years old, I was like a mess. Mm-hmm. But, like I said, I had to let all of that go. And I realized that the quality of his life could be exactly what he's doing sometimes, which is when they stim, they're not bothering anybody, so don't stop it.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly don't know what's going on in his mind, and it's perfectly okay that I don't know.
Yeah.
As long as he's happy, I'm fine with it. I don't, the thing that's the most interesting, what's interesting to me, even though there's a lack of awareness in our communities, I also noticed that there's an awful lot of empathy in our communities. And what I mean by that is that when you have someone, let's talk about bullies, for example. I noticed that the kids that are quote unquote supposed to be the baddest kids out there, they embrace him. The first thing they will say, don't go over there. Don't mess with him. Because I think our kids, they don't find it challenging to pick on the weak, what they consider the weak, or someone that's not a challenge. You know? But, you know, they don't. And so he's had good, well, you know, he goes to school. He's in an AU class, and he's maybe, I think he's the only Black child in the class. But I really worry more about being in the suburbs than I do than being in the inner city, because I've literally seen like kids in the city. When we go in the city and we do events and stuff, the kids are always like figuring out who's going to take turns, who's going to watch him. Like, I've seen him tame the most rugged people. Like, because we've been in restaurants where he, you know, so he's a chicken aficionado. And so one time we were in this restaurant and they didn't bring our food fast enough, and he went and took this man's chicken leg. Well, it was my fault because I wasn't paying attention. I was on my phone and I looked, and he went up and took, I said, "Oh, sorry." And when he got up, I swear that man was 7 feet tall. He wasn't. But in my mind, sitting in the chair, he was like, "Hey, what did you do it?" And all of a sudden, my son looked at him, and he looked back at my son. He said, "It's okay. It's okay, dude. I'm going to get me some more chicken." And I was oh, Lord, we was about to get killed. But I ordered the man some more food. But the point is that I noticed that sometimes people will fool you, right? But we just have to really, as parents, as advocates, and as a community of people, we have to keep informing people about what our needs are. And I think what our needs are in these inner city schools, we need to have more supports. They need to have better funding so that they can support our children, right? Give them the therapeutic interventions that they need. And to be quite honest with you, there needs to be a wider range of support services for parents so they don't get to the point where they are burned out. I mean, it's fine and dandy to say, "Oh, I'm going to have a mom's petty Manny night." But to be quite honest with you, that's a bunch of BS, because that mom is going through so much Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and back to Sunday, and let's throw dad in there too. These families actually need like mental health support. They need someone to be able to support them in the home when they need to just do something like go get a cup of coffee or do whatever. There's so many needs. And I think that it's great to have escapism for a day, but I think these families need it 365 days
a year. They need ongoing support. They
do. And then these autistic people, they need better supports for the simple fact that if you're going to a school for 12 years, there's no reason in those 12 years they shouldn't be able to address what you're going to do once you leave that school. They need to get better vocational training for them.
Because that's the biggest thing. Like, when I was looking for his school, I was making sure that they have really good vocational training at the school, because I've seen kids that leave the school where they're at, they turn 21 and then they're just at home with their parents. That's not good for the parent, and that's not good for the child either. You know, but like what was happening in these 12 years that they're in school, that they have no support when they graduate. And then a lot of these centers, nothing against other people with other disabilities, but like a lot of the kids don't see themselves represented in the population, right? A person with autism, doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum, they can relate to another person with autism. Not saying that they should be divided and separate or anything like that, but I feel like, you know, there needs to be more programs that, you know, cater more to different types of needs for the children.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because an autistic person, that's just it. That's why they call it a spectrum, because they learn how they learn. They respond how they respond. They process how they process. So I get it. And so I think that's the biggest problem with them having special education classes versus AU classes. An AU class is more tailored towards that autistic individual. A special education class is more geared towards, is a one size fits all. But what I would like to see is for them to be doing better assessments with these children where they're able to find out earlier on what these capabilities are. Now, people always think that your child really needs to have words, they need to talk in order to be successful, but they don't need to have words to be a computer programmer or even talk show host, because there's a young lady in Canada named Carly Fleischman. She doesn't talk at all. All she does is sit on her computer, type out all her jokes, and they're all funny, by the way.
Oh my God.
And she gets to interview people like, you know, big Hollywood people like Jimmy Fallon, Matthew McConaughey, whoever. She's interviewing them on her little computer. So,
wow.
And you don't, and to be honest with you, in order to have a fulfilling life, you don't have to do anything that's such highbrow, but they should at least be able to tell you, or at least offer these individuals the careers of their choice so they can have a voice and choice in this world. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because when you talk about communities of color, the parents, when the parents are gone, who's going to take care of them, right? Or let's put it to you like this. If you're poor, I'm just going to say it like it is, you poor, and your child has the ability to be a software performance engineer, but no one's ever teased that out and figured out that your son can code, do all these things because they just told him to go in the corner and color. Right? And so, and mine just said it's time to eat because I told him not to anyway. So go in the corner and color. Well, you're never going to know what they can do. And then that income that they can earn from being a computer programmer could take you out of that poverty, and you can set up a trust for he or she. But you don't know that because these school systems aren't set. A lot of these school systems are broken.
Yes.
I think the vocational systems are broken. And quite frankly, I don't think autistic adults have enough support, period.
They
you
don't.
know what I mean? They just don't. They don't. These colleges aren't accommodating to them. You know, even though you can take an IEP to college, we're going to have a walk on and just 5-4. Nope, he walked the other direction. I mean, they're just not as accommodating for these young people. And it's just like, I think that overall, these systems that we rely on are really not geared towards the people that they're supposed to be geared towards, especially if they're people of color.
It's and I've been saying this from day one, the systems of education and the systems of special education have now progressed since the freaking 50s, 1800s. Like, that whole system of having kids sitting in rows and that they need to be tested and the only way that they can show whether they understand something is by taking some stupid standardized test, that doesn't work. What am I showing you? That I can remember information and I can spit it back out to you. That doesn't mean that I learned it. You know, so it has to be a different system, and our kids need to be supported in a different way.
They do. And standardized tests mean nothing. They're standardized on white children. I mean, evidence-based is on white children. Everything, all those things, you know. So, like, if you tell
kids in the city taking the fucking test, like, Johnny saw a deer in the woods. These kids don't know what a deer is. They have never seen a deer in their life. So, like,
what's that gonna do?
They'll get stuck on the fact that they've never seen a deer, and then they're not really understanding what the question is really asking them. So it's like, you know, we need to be the cultural competencies to be built in, not only in like the workplace, but we need to build it in across the board. Like, people need to understand that certain things that we, quote unquote, if our kids are not exposed to that, how they're gonna perform well on it.
I mean, that's just how it is. It's like, and I don't think people, you know, and they say you're being dramatic when you're just basically asking for the things that you deserve. Like we deserve to be individuals, right? We deserve to be individuals that are supported, period. So it's not like we're asking for anything out of the ordinary. What we're saying is that the paradigm is broke. There needs to be a new paradigm. Like you need to create spaces and you need to be uplifting more people of color. So that way we're not, and see, that's the thing. People think we're always asking them to take care of us. No, what we're asking for are the platforms and the tools so we can take care of ourselves. Yes. Like, quite frankly, we don't really care what goes on in your community. Not like that. Because we know from the time we're born, like, you know, on the Lion King, when they put little Simba up and they raise him up and they go, oh, da, 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 da. Well, we're not doing that. Literally, we're holding up when we give birth to a little boy. The first thing we're thinking about is, oh, Lord, I got to teach him how not to make eye contact because then he'll be aggressive. I got to teach him how not to do this, or then they'll think he's this. They don't understand that when children of color are born, they're literally born with us worrying about how they're going to make it past 18, right? Yep. People don't understand that. They don't understand that. And so then when you add a disability to that, it's even worse. So I just think that America needs to do better, right? America needs to do better. And I also believe that these communities, our communities need to do better. We need to really start taking pen to paper. And this is one of the things I tell parents. You can't, like, parents will be like, oh, I'm an IEP expert, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, you can be that. But like, if your school ain't got no money, all of that stuff you argued about for 3 hours ain't going to help you.
Nothing.
And you're saying that from a school teacher, you know, from being an educator, you know. And see, and I'm like, whoever told you that, they just sold you the okie doke. Because the real is, girl, you need to take a pen and a piece of paper and you need to start writing your senator and your whoever and say, listen, yo, I ain't voting for you until you fix this school system situation. I ain't voting for you until you make sure that these buses are running correctly and picking up my child on time.
Let's not talk about the busing situation, girl, because
right. And I ain't voting for you if you don't have any autism classes specific for my child that has one teacher, 3 parapros, and 6 students. Because if you got him in a class with 20 kids, he ain't learning nothing. And he needs to learn how he needs to learn so he can thrive and or he or she can thrive. And I apologize to your audience because there's a lot of young women who are autistic, but at the end of the day, our children deserve to be whoever they're going to be, right? And whoever they want to be.
Yes. And
they can't do that if we continue to sit in like I call a puddle of ableism. And it's easy to be ableist because as a mother, you're automatically ableist because you as soon as your child falls down, you're like, ooh, let me kiss my baby.
Yeah.
So, you know, as a mother, you automatically, this is your title. But the point is that we gotta do better and we gotta get stronger and we need to know, you know what I'm saying? We just need to do better. And then what you don't know, ask somebody.
It's true.
Yep.
Oh man, I love this conversation. So, I have a couple of questions here, but I feel like our conversation just like really like hit everything. But I want you to talk a little bit more about the organization, the Color of Autism. So you guys do these talks and bring in experts and educate people. So what else? What other kind of things do you do for the community? And just start with that.
So the community itself is spread all over the United States. That's part of the reasons why, you know, when COVID hit, we were doing in-person parent training just in our local area, right? Oh, okay. But we've always been a national organization, and we found that basically opening it up to the world, literally to the world, because I also facilitate conferences in Africa, like West Africa. I go there once a year. But so we do these parent trainings that we even did research on, and we found that parent training better equips parents with the things that they may encounter along their journeys, right? So then we also have support groups. We have like a dad support group. I don't know what they talk about because I'm not a dad, but the reality of it is it's a place where men can come and convene online, and it's a safe place for them. And people go, well, you need a mom's group. You know who's in our parent training? Mostly the moms. So, but we are gonna do like a mom's group. But for the most part, we didn't think about it so much because we always had moms in our training.
Yeah.
And they always keep in touch with one another. And then we are working the kinks out on this. We've had a couple of social groups. We tried to do them online, but for younger kids and for older kids and for adults. But it's really hard online to make, and it's been hard for us and our professionals to make the assessments, because we do have professionals that do evaluations so we can put these kids in these different groups. But it's hard. So now that everything's kind of been lifted and it's kind of safe to go outside, we're going to start doing things again within our local area, but we'll still have all of the virtual things available because it's just something that people expect at this point. You know, I thought that when COVID, the restrictions lifted, people wouldn't be around, but we've even gotten more people participating because I think they feel better knowing that they don't have to necessarily have something in their city. They need to have something and some people to embrace them, and knowing that they have a network of people that makes them feel better. And, you know, because okay, so this is going to sound shady, but I'm going to say it anyway. We've even had parents come to our training and literally replicate everything we're doing, including the name, close to the name. And I was just like, girl. But on the real though, it's not, our programs are geared towards you replicating them in your community, because I can't be everywhere. Yeah. You know? And so it is what it is. I think that we need to do what we got to do. And so that's what the Color of Autism is. I mean, we're about to set up, we're going to have some stuff on demand pretty soon. Okay. So we'll have people come on and give lectures, and you'll have a passcode. All of our services are free. Let me say that too, because we are 501c3. So everything is free. I think that's important to point out, because there's a lot of people who are businesses out there, and I'm not knocking it.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like a lot of, like, you were spending so much money at the beginning. That's insane, bro. I would have been broke. Like, no, like,
so I was broke. I was like, nah, like what? You know, that's when you stop answering your phone. I was glad that was another time. I was like, ooh, I don't need this landline. Cut it all off.
Because the thing is like, I don't knock it. I understand the reasoning behind it, but also, like, some of these fees for some of this stuff, like these systems and like little things that people are doing online, it's really crazy. How you gonna charge $500 for some? And I'm not gonna even say what it is, but $500 to a parent that you don't even know if they got it like that.
So I remember someone telling me this, and it stuck with me. And it was another advocate, and they have a business. But you know what? They have a business. But what I like about them is this. What I like about their mythology is this: if you ain't got no money, they ain't gonna keep dragging you along. And I was like, that's cold. But it's not, because then they told me that this one person, quote unquote, autism coach, I don't know what the hell an autism coach is. Because
I've seen that online on Instagram. I'm like, I don't know what that is.
And that's so foolish to me, because you can't coach a parent. You can't coach a parent through nothing when they're at that early onset stage of getting that diagnosis, because you're a hot mess. So there's nothing anybody could have said to me that could have coached me out of my self-imposed misery. Okay. So giving you $2,000 wasn't going to help me, but something that this young lady said to me stuck out. She said one of these people was known for telling parents that if they love their child, they put the charge on the credit card so they could. And she said that's something that I would never do. And I believe her. She wouldn't do it. Now, if you indicate that you can't pay her, she ain't going to fool with you. But at least I take somebody not fooling with me than somebody trying to pressure me into taking money.
Mm-mm.
You know, and I thought about that, and I said, she makes sense. That makes sense. You know what I'm
But
saying?
also, I feel like some of these people, like, they need to have some kind of sliding scale. If you know a parent doesn't make that much money and they're poor, there should be
They
some
do
kind
need
of
to have a
sliding
sliding
scale.
scale.
You know what I'm saying?
But so I've had to look at it from two different ways. And at first I was like, they shouldn't be charging people. What you doing? You charging black people, blah, blah. But white people charge other white people.
I know.
And I was like, but then I realized something. And I had this happen to me. I have a friend that's an advocate. She's a good IEP expert. I have her talk to my parents. She does sessions with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I have people that call me up and they say, oh, I have this terrible IEP problem, and I'll give them over to her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens is they'll take an hour up of her time. An hour.
Yeah.
They'll be crying. They go through the phases that we go through when we're upset, right?
Yeah.
Well, she tells them what to do and they don't follow through. That's time consuming. And then I had to think about it. And I said, you can put a dollar amount to that.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So now I better understand why some people charge, because if you're not serious, you done wasted my time, an hour of my day, listening to you cry and complain. Or if you don't bring all the information to the table.
Yeah, if you're not prepared.
So I had a mom reach out to me a couple weeks ago. Can you come to my IEP meeting? Who are you? Like, that's what the email said. And I'm like, who are you and where do you live? And she said, and I said, well, did you get a draft? And she said, no, but if I get a draft, can you help me? And I'm like, no, I want parents to understand you cannot be in the 11th hour trying to seek out help.
No, you got to look for help with enough time. You can't just expect somebody to help you out of the blue. People
like, they don't tell you, like, for real though, they don't tell you on Monday, on Wednesday, you're going to have an IEP meeting. They don't do it like that. They have to give you ample enough time. They do
legally, they need to give you at least a month.
Right.
30 days.
And so if you didn't get enough time, you have the right to say, I don't want to have it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then we don't even want to talk about the parents that don't even want IEPs. They want 504s because that sounds better.
We're not gonna.
Right. But you know what I'm talking about? Ooh, that sound better. And it's like, okay, so you go 504 all your accommodations out there. You're like, what you mean? I was like, well, IEP is a law. 504 is a suggestion.
Exactly. They don't need to legally uphold a 504.
Oh, well, I'm going to put him in Montessori school. You heard that one too.
Yeah, of course. And then the thing is, for me, is like, I've been teaching for 9 years. You know the amount of kids that have autism that all it says on their IEP is speech and language. Speech and language. As a teacher, there's so many tools that I can use when I know that a child has autism, right? That is not a secret. That